Now, in the Premier League this weekend, Bournemouth host Crystal Palace, knowing that a win would go a long way to securing their top-flight status for a fourth straight season. It is a far cry from the depths of despair that the club found themselves in when manager Eddie Howe was first appointed. I went to the south coast of England to speak to Howe and those who know him best. At just 40 years old, Eddie Howe is approaching a decade as a Football League manager. But a lot has changed since he was first appointed Bournemouth boss in January 2009. At that time, the Cherries were second bottom of English football's fourth tier. They were under a transfer embargo and had a 17-point deduction in the standings because they were in administration. The club was on its knees and at a desperate time turned to their popular former defender, who was just 29 at the time.
I don't think we were out of options. It was the obvious option. So, I think when you say, we're out of options, there's always options. But were they affordable? The answer was no.
So let's meet the man they're all talking about. I recently visited the Vitality Stadium to catch up with Howe and started by asking him if he had to pinch himself when he looked at how far the club has come under his management.
No, I don't, because the change for me has been although it's happened really quickly, it seems quite gradual. The reality is, if someone had said back then what would happen, I would be sat here as manager of a Premier League club, then I would have had to do more than pinch myself to believe that that is even remotely possible. But it's happened, and I think when you're in it and surrounded by it every day, you begin to accept it very quickly. I think you have to, otherwise you wouldn't be able to work properly.
Describe the state of the club when you took over.
Well, I had no team to speak of in terms of, so I got given the job and I had to build my own team. And I think at that stage it was about trying to stay in the league. I think we had a whole host of off-the-field problems and troubles that there's well documented, but financial troubles and bailiffs coming in and no money to speak of, players being paid late, a lot of restrictions on what we could and couldn't do in terms of obviously things and ideas we had for the players we couldn't implement. The club had no training ground of its own. We were training at Camford School, which is a great facility, but constantly talking about the rent there and the fact it wasn't being paid and we may lose our training ground. So you can understand, sort of coming into that, my first job, a lot of off-field things that we needed to sort. And of course, my only focus was trying to keep the team in the league, but that was obviously going to be very difficult.
You were 29 at the time. You were younger than some of the players. Was that difficult?
Yeah, I found that quite easy, quite natural, really. I think I'd always been, even as a player, I think I'd been slightly, not different's the word, slightly older than my time. I think I'd maybe a young player, but really I was acting like a player who was older. I was always aware of my responsibilities as a player and what I needed to do to be the best that I could be. And I think then when I became manager, it was quite an easy transition to suddenly try and lead the group. And as you said, there's a lot of players that were older than me at that time, but I wasn't fazed by that. I think at times it was more difficult for them than it was for me. I just went about doing the job in the best way that I could.
Howe made an almost immediate impact. Against the odds, he secured Football League survival just 4 months into his new job. The following season, the club won promotion after finishing second in League Two. His success earned him a shot at Burnley, where he stayed for 18 months. Then, with Bournemouth struggling in League One, the prodigal son returned mid-season and immediately earned promotion. After a season of consolidation in the Championship, in 2015, Bournemouth won the title and earned promotion to the Premier League for the first time in their history. John Williams was coach at Bournemouth when Howe made his playing debut. He's known him since he was a 14-year-old at the club's youth academy. He says Howe's lifetime relationship with Bournemouth was almost a non-starter.
We wanted to take him on as a pro. Tony Pulis wasn't sure, who was the manager at the time, whether he was good enough. Had 2 or 3 looks at him, Tony, and it was about the 3rd game he came to see him. Ted pulled out a real good performance and Tony okayed it, and that got him his first pro contract.
Neil Perrott has also closely followed Howe's career from day one. As the club reporter for the Bournemouth Echo, he says Howe wasn't your average footballer.
He used to read the Times and a lot of the other players would be reading the Sun, if you like. And I know, or I think that he used to sort of dabble in shares when he was 18, 19, 20. Now, not many 18, 19, 20-year-olds do things like that, so he was always very astute.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd probably say, but a little bit old before my time. So I do remember certain things, and it wasn't done on purpose to look different. It was just that was my character. So yeah, I was reading the Times as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old coming onto the bus for away games, having my paper with me, and everyone going, "What are you doing?" It was against the grain, really, and it was just, for me, it was normal. I remember sitting next to the manager going to away games. So instead of sitting at the back, I was sitting at the front. Now, part of that was because I used to get travel sick, and being at the front helped me alleviate that. But also, it's nice. I was used to talk to the manager about the game, about systems, tactics, and I almost enjoyed that more than maybe sitting at the back with my teammates. So, yeah, dealing with shares was something that my granddad had taught me through, and something that I was interested in. So I didn't mind being different, and being different for me was, if people didn't like it, then that was just me.
Did you always want to be a manager?
Not on any level, because I thought I was going to be too introverted to do it. I was quite quiet, and as I say, being different was fine, but I wasn't extreme in anything. I was, although I was captain of the team from quite a young age, I wasn't in the dressing room, I wasn't one of the loud lads, and I always felt that shyness, introvertness, if that is a word, in the group. So I felt managing was something that you needed to really push yourself. You know, you had to talk in front of a lot of people. You have to, you just have to put yourself out there, and I wasn't sure that was in my nature. So coaching was more something I was looking at. Managing wasn't on my list at all.
Bar his 18-month spell at Burnley, Howe has spent his entire managerial career at Bournemouth. His return to the club was partly driven by personal reasons. The death of his mother meant he wanted to return to be closer to his family. That period changed his perspective on football and ambition.
His mum was a big part of his football career. She really supportive, and his whole family member, his granddad at times as well, being there.
Yeah, it was a strange time, because my personal situation was very difficult. You know, I lost my mum, and a lot of my family were here, and I felt a real pull to come back to the area because the people that I loved were suffering, and I felt me being here would make a big difference to them. My personal ambitions and drive to be successful and achieve great things, manage at the highest level that I could, had to take a back seat. I was going from a championship club to a team that was in the relegation places in League One, so people would question that decision and go, well, you know, I can't quite work that one out, but they wouldn't have been in my situation.
Steve Fletcher is a former teammate and a current first-team coach at Bournemouth. He believes Howe's attention to detail is what's driven the club's recent success.
He's a difference maker, you know, he sees things and he gets the job done in whatever way possible, and make sure everyone around him is, you know, singing off the same song sheet, because if they're not, we haven't got that togetherness, and our motto is together anything is possible, and you know, his vision has brought that to this football club. It's incredible, really.
Looking back, I was probably, straight away, as soon as I took the job, I was probably caught up in it, but I think now the job is so much more demanding. You have so many, of course, we're in the Premier League compared to League Two, so it's totally different. But I think there is no escape. Wherever you turn, there's a reminder of Premier League football. I've got kids now, and the first thing they talk about when I get through the door is football. So there's literally no escape from the job at all.
And would you encourage your kids into a career in football?
I would, if that's what they wanted to do, and I'd have no problem supporting them through that. But I think you can't be afraid of criticism. That would be the biggest thing I'd say to them. I think you've got to have a really thick skin. You've got to be prepared to take a lot of knocks. I mean, if I look back at my career as a whole, as a player and a manager, I have more disappointments than successes. So many more disappointments than successes. And I think if you can't take that disappointment, then you're not going to last long in the job. So you've got to dust yourself down, and then you've got to find the strength to go again.
And over the last decade, there's no doubt that Eddie Howe has shown that strength. But what's next for both him and the club?
For me, the goal was if we could have reached the Championship, that would have been utopia. To even think about the Premier League, you know, you would have been sectioned.
He's really been steering the ship, and I've always said that without him steering the ship, I don't think they would have done it. And if he ever decides to leave the ship, I think the ship could be in a spot of bother.
In terms of loyalty, the fans are the only ones who stay loyal at a football club. But Eddie Howe is a one-off in terms of loyalty.
And finally, I have to ask you one hypothetical question. Say England crash out of the World Cup at the group stages, Gareth Southgate's fired, and the phone rings, they offer you the job. What do you say?
Yeah, well, that's a well put together question. I think I've said many times, I think the England manager's job is the pinnacle for any football manager who's English. I look at it the opposite way around. I hope Gareth goes and wins the World Cup and comes back a national hero. But you know, that is genuinely my wish, because I want England to do well. And I think the job is one of the, if not the hardest in world football. And I've said many times before, when I was linked with it a while ago, I felt totally unprepared for that job, because it's the biggest, and I think you need a lot of knowledge to do it. You need maybe potentially European experience, which I don't have. So I'd consider myself a long way from doing it.